I'm talking with Alan Bell, Chief Minister, about the Alban government's international relationship framework document, which is coming out on Friday. And this is a sort of a manual for dummies, is it, on what the Alban offers if you've just landed from somewhere you have no idea about it?
It's a twofold document. Basically, it's to inform the people of the island what our external relations division of the Cabinet Office does. It explains the constitutional relationship, it explains in part the relationship with the European Union, but it also explains the range of messages that we use now to promote the Alban when we meet politicians in London, in our business community, and of course with politicians in Brussels. And the government, as you know, has changed in the UK now. There are new personalities in, new government alliances, and it's really important now just to remind people what we're doing, to say quite clearly that we have as our top priority engagement with the international community to ensure that we protect the Alban's good name, we protect the economy, and that the new personalities coming into power in Westminster fully understand the relationship with the Alban.
First thing you tell them, though, it's not an independent sovereign state. You know, it's saying we're part of a crown dependency, and explain that outside the EU, but there with the protocols. Mm-hmm. Does that all work for or against?
It works for, undoubtedly, because the main and most regular reaction we find when we're talking to politicians is they haven't the faintest idea about the Alban. We tend to think that the whole universe revolves around the island, but of course in Westminster we're not even a pinprick on their radar, and even less so in Brussels. And therefore it's really as important that we explain to them exactly what the Alban's true constitutional position is, because the real danger is when they're taking decisions in Westminster in relation to whatever the issue might be, the Alban could quite easily be collateral damage in the broader impact of some of those decisions. So it is really important that they fully understand we are a crown dependency, we are linked to the United Kingdom, we're not part of Europe, but we demand to be considered when some of these bigger decisions are made.
I mean, the issue of the governor's come up again recently about that sort of thing. Are you saying here you've been transferring powers to Tynwald where possible? But how does that rest with you? I mean, especially you used to be such a guy for independence way back.
Yeah, I mean, my first when I first stood for the House of Keys in 1976, I stood as a candidate for McVannon, and I still am a passionate believer in the Alban. But it needs to be recognised the role of the governor has changed dramatically. I've been in Tynwald now for over 30 years, and in that time it has changed beyond all recognition. The governor almost did govern when I first came in. He presided over Tynwald. He had extensive powers across government. Bit by bit, though, incrementally over the years, we've reduced those powers to the situation now where he is the Queen's representative here. He represents the head of state, but he has far fewer powers involved with the political system. He's not the all-powerful individual that some people sort of hint at.
Oh, am I right though? We still pay for it though, or does?
Yes, we pay for.
Is that a bit of a?
He's a representative of the head of state, and I think in every jurisdiction where a governor exists, that country pays for the government house and the expenses related to it. It's nothing unusual. It's an issue which has been raised in the past, but it's something we have to live with for the time being, I'm afraid, while we have the Queen as head of state.
Would you like to see a Manx governor at all, or whatever and the terminology change maybe from governor? I mean, the governor, you can have whatever terminology. It's not the title you put on the person, it's the role that the person plays, which is the important thing. Fancy the job? Well, you know, I'm allegedly accused of being a dictator. You know, I don't want to step down from being a dictator to pure mere governor. It's a step backwards, I think. Let's get back to this press release. And you mentioned about Europe a lot and the pros and cons. We have this Brussels office, don't we? We have a man in Brussels. Yeah. I'm trying to do a bit of research on him. Is it the same person who's been there for some years? And no. We don't hear much from them, that's what I'm trying to say. No. Well, he's not a public figure in that sense. He's our eyes and ears in Brussels. He used to work in the External Relations Office here, a very, very able individual. And he gives us feedback as to evolving issues in Brussels which might affect the Isle of Man.
He also liaises with the Channel Islands in their office there, the Scottish
yes,
office.
they've got quite a presence of Channel Islands, haven't they?
They've certainly more than we have,
Yes.
and we work together very closely. When I go to Brussels, and I'll be going to Brussels again in a couple of weeks, he is the person that arranges the meetings and gives us background intelligence on the people involved in these meetings. He is increasingly becoming a very important cog in the wheel in terms of our broader intelligence network.
And yet the UK could have a referendum which we'd have no part of,
Yes,
and completely, I mean literally change everything, and including the Isle of Man.
It could very much so, and I've already raised this as one of the consequences of the outcome of the UK election, that we have removed one area of uncertainty from the political equation in the sense that there will be no coalition. But there is a new coalition now we need to focus on, and that is the coalition between the right and left wing of the Conservative Party. And bearing in mind that the Tories only have a very small majority, and the Eurosceptic wing of the Tory party is quite large and quite vocal, we have to be careful now that in their drive for the EU in or out referendum and the vociferous nature of the anti-Europeans in the Tory party, that the Isle of Man's position does not get threatened by that. But if there was to be a referendum and the UK decided in extremis that it was going to withdraw from Europe, then our relationship with Europe would change too, because we're not an independent state, we're not a sovereign state. We are linked to Europe through Protocol 3 of the Treaty of Rome, the UK's Treaty of Rome, and therefore our linkage will fall when the UK's membership ends. So we need to be very conscious that this is the next big challenge for the island.
And that's the only thing that's really put clear water between us and the Channel Islands, hasn't it? On certain sorts of businesses?
On some
they're not
business,
at all
yeah.
in Europe, are they? Am I right in that?
They don't have a customs agreement with the United Kingdom the way we do, because we have VAT.
Yeah.
So they have customs barriers between the Channel Islands and Europe, and UK being part of Europe. Which enabled us to develop a manufacturing industry here, for example, which you don't really have in the Channel Islands. But constitutionally, the Crown dependencies are all three are the same. So if the UK was to pull out, our relationship with Protocol 3 and the Treaty of Rome would fall, and so would Jersey's and Guernsey's. So constitutionally, we're in the same position, but from an economic point of view, we're slightly different.
And overall, would you be worried if we were out of it? I mean,
yes,
it has been
absolutely.
beneficial for the island.
It's been very beneficial, and you know, Europe. There are problems with Europe. There's no question about that, and I think there is a general agreement that Europe needs to be reformed. The debate is about how extensive that reform is, but you can't lose sight of the fact the European Union is a trading group of over 500 million people. If we are serious about developing an international economy on the Isle of Man, we have to have access to that market. And if any steps were taken which would put barriers between the Isle of Man's ability to trade with Europe, it would seriously damage many of the economic sectors that we have here at present, and most definitely be a major barrier to any new sectors which might develop in the future. So our engagement with Europe is absolutely paramount if we're going to develop the economy the way we need it to go.
Back to what I was saying, it must be frustrating. You have no influence on this whatsoever, really. I mean,
it is frustrating, but we have to recognise the fact we're not a sovereign state. And even if we were, if the Isle of Man was to declare independence, for argument's sake, to get round that problem, there's a big question mark as to whether Europe would even accept a country as small as the Isle of Man into the European Federation. So it's not a simple issue, but it is certainly one we absolutely have to stay focused on in the time ahead.
Okay, well, finally, I mean, this document, when it comes out, who exactly is the end user going to be? Have you got targeted people that are going to be getting this sort of thing?
It's in the first instance, it's for political members of Tynwald, so they understand exactly what our strategy is, because sometimes there is a doubt in some members' minds as to why I'm travelling so much, why are we constantly lobbying Westminster, why are we constantly lobbying the European Union, why are we in Brussels, but also it's to reassure the Manx people and the business community that we have a properly thought through strategy, we know what we're doing, these are the targets, these are the messages that we're putting out, and this strategy is something which we absolutely have to live with and develop for the foreseeable future. And the international aspect of our policy development now is every bit as important as all other aspects of it. At one time, the people did question why we should travel. As you know, you've used the term yourself, politicians going away, they're only on jollies. nothing could be further from the truth. This is absolutely fundamental to our long-term existence and the long-term growth of the economy. If we fail on this, then we are building major problems for ourselves further down the road. And this is to reassure people we have a properly thought through strategy and one which we are pursuing vigorously at the moment.